2 weeks till November when Nixon's ultimatum to Hanoi comes due and the war shifts to the second front. October 15th, a nationwide moratorium against the war. While tens of thousands descend on Washington, businesses and schools shut down across the country. This despite the fact the U.S. casualty rate has reached its lowest level in nearly 2 years.
At some level, he had to be asking himself, as the anti-war passions intensified in 1969, he had to be anticipating the price, ultimately, that would have to be paid.
Leading protesters plan a second rally for November and vow to hold demonstrations once a month. The pressure is now on the commander-in-chief.
By the time November came, Nixon faced a choice as to whether to act on his threat or not.
In the wake of the largest protest of the war, he does not. Instead, the commander-in-chief takes up the battle on the second front to raise support for his cause.
But the question before us is not whether some Americans are for peace and some Americans are against peace. The question at issue is not whether Johnson's war becomes Nixon's war. The great question is, how can we win America's peace?
Very good speech. Roger Morris, who was on the NSC staff, and I did, I think, 12 drafts of the speech, each one covered by a memo saying we think this is a mistake, this is going to make it Nixon's war. They took the drafts, not the memos.
So tonight, to you, the great silent majority of my fellow Americans, I ask for your support. Let us understand, North Vietnam cannot defeat or humiliate the United States. Only Americans can do that.
Nixon's appeal to the silent majority inflames the cause against him. 10 days later, Capital City erupts. More than 250,000 protesters surround the White House. Riot police combat rocks and bottles with tear gas.
He would go out and flash the V symbol, which he knew would irritate them so that they might chuck a rock or two, and then the headline would be that the protesters were attacking the President of the United States, and this was good politics.
By the final days of 1970, polls show half the country believes the war is a mistake and morally indefensible. While the commander-in-chief is publicly drawing down the American commitment, by the spring of 1970, he has returned to the Iron Fist, the secret escalation of the war. B-52s again strike the Ho Chi Minh Trail, but Operation Menu has had an unanticipated effect, driving the North Vietnamese further into Cambodia. In March, the government of Prince Sihanouk falls in Phnom Penh. The new regime begins fighting the communist invaders and turns to Washington for help. The commander-in-chief secretly draws up plans for a ground invasion into Cambodia.
While there were rumors about it, most of us on the NSC staff, we just didn't know about it until a week beforehand when Kissinger met with 5 of us, who he called his bleeding hearts.
And they told me, they gave me their reasons why they opposed it.
This was going to be a disaster because it would extend an American commitment into Cambodia as well as Vietnam.
Everyone knew in the White House, and the president especially knew, because he was a political genius of a sort, and he knew that there was going to be massive opposition.
This is the decision I have made. In cooperation with the armed forces of South Vietnam, attacks are being launched this week to clean out major...
The commander-in-chief explains to the nation why it is imperative to send ground troops into Cambodia. That South Vietnamese soldiers would be fighting alongside Americans, a product of his Vietnamization.
This is not an invasion of Cambodia.
Walking upstairs after he had delivered that speech, there was almost a transfiguration in a way. It was strange. His hair was whiter or grayer, and his whole demeanor was different. I think that there he knew that he'd crossed a Rubicon. He could foresee the domestic cost of that. And I think he recognized it fully that night.
The political cost, perhaps, but he could not possibly have imagined the consequence, the firestorm of protest that would turn deadly on the Second Front. U.S. and South Vietnamese forces roll into Cambodia. A government takeover in Phnom Penh has given the commander-in-chief a green light to go after North Vietnamese sanctuaries. He has personally targeted 14 enemy sanctuaries, none more vital than the cache site at Parrot's Beak.
It's only 33 miles from Saigon.
The Vietnamese had 4 divisions within 50 miles of Saigon, and they were opening supply lines throughout Cambodia, infiltrating weapons with which Americans were being killed.
While Kissinger strongly supports the move, 3 of his staffers resign in protest.
The decision that I made in Cambodia will save those lives. I could be wrong, but if I am wrong, I'm responsible and nobody else.
The Second Front explodes in protest. Students at more than 440 college campuses strike against the president. 2 days into the unrest, and Nixon pours fuel on the fire.
I remember at one time he was over at the Defense Department and talking to some parents of soldiers in Vietnam and described the protesters as these bums. I don't think he really felt that, given the audience that he was talking to.
2 days later, and the war on the Second Front suffers its first casualties.
The National Guard and other law enforcers are harassed by rock throwing and name calling. And at Kent State in Ohio, 4 students are killed.
He had told the nation this move into Cambodia would save lives. But now it is stealing them here at home. Hundreds of thousands of demonstrators descend on the White House.
I remember being in the Secret Service command post, listening to what was happening around the city, and over the speaker came these words, "Searchlight is on the lawn." Searchlight was the president's code name. This was 4 o'clock in the morning, and Searchlight was supposed to be asleep, not on the lawn.
It's classic Nixon. It's bizarre, it's not fully planned or explained.
Nixon shows up at the Lincoln Memorial, where demonstrators sleep on the steps.
It was almost surreal. Out there with no filter. This was just raw Richard Nixon talking directly to young people who I think were almost stunned by the fact that he was there.
I mean, it's kind of a riddle and a mystery.
It was not the move into Cambodia that kept him up till 4 or 5 in the morning. It was the tragedy of a divided nation, and his sense that there was really not a lot he could do.